Hello, everybody. It goes without saying that today's been a busy day already in Pittsburgh, and a day that I don't think many fans expected to take place in season, but yet here we are. Matt Canada has been fired as Steelers offensive coordinator, and there's just a lot to dissect with all of this. It's the first time that the Steelers have made an in-season coaching change of any kind since 1941. This is something that they just don't traditionally do. And the fact that they have done it speaks a lot to just how putrid the offense has been. Um, and if you're a Steelers fan and you aren't following Daniel Valente at Stats Guy Daniel on Twitter, you absolutely should. From the score, he's terrific. He put things into perspective really well. In the 44 games as the Steelers offensive coordinator, Matt Canada and the offense produced 0 games with 400 yards, 1 game with 300 passing yards. That game was, I believe, last year in Kenny Pickett's first start against the Bills, in which they lost 35-3, 38-3. They've had 2 games with 30 points. Those games were last year against Cincinnati at home, where they lost 37-30, and then the game in 2021 on the road against the Chargers. I believe they put up 30 points in that game. Those are the only games they've scored 30 points in the Matt Canada era. 7 games with 2+ passing touchdowns, and we know that Ben Roethlisberger was responsible for 6 of them. Kenny Pickett only had 1. 27 games with 20 or fewer first downs, and 28 games with 20 or fewer points. That ain't going to cut it. And when he was asked about it in terms of who was, who came to the decision to fire Matt Canada, Mike Tomlin said that it was his decision and his alone, meaning that Omar Khan, Art Rooney, none of them were consulted when doing it. This was a Mike Tomlin decision, which is good, but you would have liked to have seen it sooner. You would have liked, like, Steelers fans, and I think, just fans in general, NFL media, people, fans, everybody in general, I think, was expecting Matt Canada to be gone coming into this season. And hell, if we go back to last season, whether it be the loss to Philadelphia, where they were just demoralized and the offense looked horrible. The only touchdown they scored that game was off of a Chase Claypool touchdown pass to Derek Watt. I think they lost that game 35-13. This isn't anything new. And again, we thought coming into this year, okay, Canada will be gone. They'll make the necessary changes in the offseason, bring in somebody else, because Kenny Pickett isn't going to get any better in this offense. And they just ran it back. And people who cover this team, who are fans of this team, knew the writing was going to be on the wall as soon as that was announced that Canada was going to be back. And being somebody who's been as vocal as a Kenny Pickett critic as anybody, it can be largely agreed that whatever his full potential was going to be was never going to be met with Canada as offensive coordinator. But that does beg the question, are things going to get that much better? Because now they've got 7 games remaining in the year where now Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan will be running the offense. But I think fans are going to be wildly disappointed if they're getting their hopes up and thinking that, oh, okay, Matt Canada's gone, this offense is going to score 30 points a game. It's not going to happen. Because one way or the other, there's still a variant of this offense. It's just different guys running it. And for better or worse, Canada getting fired was absolutely needed. I'm not arguing that whatsoever. This is a move that should have been done last year. And the fact that it's taken this long to do it is malpractice. However, there were instances in which guys were open. Pickett wasn't throwing it. And if he was underthrowing it, overthrowing it. We can blame Matt Canada all we want. He was a very large problem, but we also need to acknowledge that the quarterback has been equally as big a problem, because he's regressed in a manner that is concerning. And a lot of people, like I said, are, okay, Matt Canada's gone. That means Kenny Pickett's going to be better. Doesn't necessarily mean that. Because even at Matt Canada's worst, guys were still getting open. We saw it last night against Cleveland with Deontay Johnson in the red zone. Came wide open on a crosser. Would have walked into the end zone. Probably would have won the game. And Pickett did a pirouette in the pocket and got sacked. The game against Tennessee, Pickens was coming across the field on a shallow crosser. Pickett threw it 10 feet over his head. They punted. Matt Canada can't throw it to the receivers. And again, let me reiterate. I'm not saying Matt Canada shouldn't have been fired. He absolutely should have been. His offense is not a sustainable NFL offense, and it hasn't been since he's been in charge. But don't just assume that Kenny Pickett is all of a sudden going to figure out how to play quarterback at the NFL level just because Matt Canada's not there. And because he's still missing throws, he's still not seeing the field well. Like, not everything is on Matt Canada. A lot of it was, but a lot of it's also on Kenny Pickett. And we've seen all the stats that have come out in the past few days of the 350 quarterbacks who've thrown 500 passes. He has the lowest touchdown percentage of all of them. He's the only one with one lower than 2% touchdown percentage. That's concerning. The fact that Matt Ryan has more touchdown passes than him in the past 2 seasons, and Matt Ryan hasn't played a game since December 17th of last season and has spent this season in the CBS booth, that's concerning. The fact that Davis Mills has more touchdown passes than him in the past 2 seasons, that's concerning. So yeah, it was the right move to fire Matt Canada, but that doesn't mean everything's all of a sudden fixed. And Mike Tomlin did reiterate that Kenny Pickett is going to be the starting quarterback, which I think we all kind of expected. Because now this is kind of just like a last lifeline for Kenny Pickett, saying, okay, we'll get rid of Matt Canada, show us something. And if he doesn't, then that really is going to beckon the question going into this offseason, okay, they're going to bring in a new OC, you might as well bring in a new quarterback as well. Now, who that new offensive coordinator is going to be, I'm going to write a little bit about that today on Behind the Steel Curtain. And for everybody who's kept up with our content today, the past off season, we appreciate you. Today has been a very eventful day, which goes without saying. And if you've been reading our stuff, keeping up with it, keeping up with our coverage, we appreciate you. Thank you for doing that. More of that will be certainly coming throughout the next day, throughout the next week, throughout the rest of the season. So we appreciate you for tuning in and reading and all of that fun stuff. So I'll dive into who I think are the best candidates to be the next offensive coordinator. But the next 2 months are going to tell us a lot about the future of the franchise and where they're going. Because if Pickett continues playing like this, there's no reason why he should be brought back next year. Because it'll just be the same situation, just with different roles. Where, okay, it's very clear that if he does play poor, it's very clear that he's not the guy. And if they bring him back, I think there's going to be a lot of irritated fans for the same reason that there was irritated fans when Matt Canada was brought back. And I don't know what the threshold is of like how well he has to play to earn a third year, but it's not going to be a very high bar because we know what the Steelers organization is. They're historically far too patient. And if I'm a betting man, Kenny Pickett's going to be the starter in week 1 of 2024, regardless. That's just how the Steelers do things. But Matt Canada's gone. And now we're going to see, okay, what can Eddie Faulkner do? What can Mike Sullivan do in terms of running this offense? But again, it was a move that had to be made, especially after the Browns game. And especially with how that game ended and how vocal guys have become with their frustrations. And there's been 2 things that have been signaled out by fans and media alike that had to have been the tipping point. One, the 3-and-out, the 14-second 3-and-out in which they could have kept giving the ball to Jaylen Warren, gotten into field goal range, ended the game, and instead they gave the ball right back to the Browns, and the Browns marched down the field, kicked a game-winning field goal. That was probably a big tipping point, but also after the game and during the game with the way that offensive skill position guys were, it just seemed that they have had enough. The body language of both George Pickens and Deontay Johnson after several plays just looking defeated, wondering what the hell they were doing out in the field to begin with because it's clear that nothing's changing. Like if you go back and watch that, it was a 2nd and 11. They ran a swing pass to Jalen Warren, and they lose yards. And you can just see Deontay Johnson walking across the field, shrugging his shoulders, signaling like, "What are we doing?" But after the game, Najee Harris, we can talk all we want about Najee Harris's production, how he hasn't lived up to that of a first round pick. We can talk about his on the field stuff as much as we want, and the criticisms of him on the field and his production, they're fair. However, he's also been one of the most calming presences in the locker room, and he's been a vocal leader in the locker room. And the fact that when he was asked if he thinks that other teams can see what plays are coming, he took a long pause, looked around at every media member, let out a defeated laugh, and said, yeah, I think that they are. I think it's very evident that it's easy to see it coming. And, he went on to say that he's tired of this shit. He went on to say that, yeah, we have a winning record right now, but if we keep playing like this, it's going to get us nowhere. And he's right. And when you have your top players on offense visibly just done, you got to make changes. And was it maybe a little too late? Yeah, probably. It should have been done a long time ago, but I suppose better late than never. But when you have Najee Harris, who's very visibly irritated, George Pickens, who went on his whole thing on social media a few weeks ago, Deontay Johnson, who had to be pulled away from a coach on the sideline this past Sunday, like everything was boiling over all at once. And the fact that they couldn't beat a rookie quarterback in his second career start, which, by the way, that's the second time that they've been dealt that hand this season, and it's come down to the wire both times, which is a problem. They've had 2 games against rookie quarterbacks in their second career starts. First one was against Tennessee and Will Levis, and that game came down to the final drive, and they almost lost. And then against Dorian Thompson-Robinson and the Browns, that game came down to the final drive, and they did lose. Can't blame the defense for that. They held both teams to under 20 points. They did their job. They've done their job for the most part all season. The numbers might not look pretty, but when you're on the field so much, yeah, teams are going to accumulate more yards. They've been a very bend-don't-break unit this season. They allowed 13 points, and you lose. So the defense has got to be frustrated too. Like if you're guys like TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, a Landon Roberts who's played his ass off this season, and you see that, and your team leads the league in punts per game by a good margin, you can't sustain long drives. I think they're 30th in the league in plays per drive. That's defeating for a team. And yes, they're 6-4 right now. They still hold a playoff spot. But as Najee Harris said, that isn't going to get them anywhere if they keep playing like this. Which, by the way, was what our staff has been saying all season. That's basically what we've been trying to reiterate. Like, yeah, you can do that against bad teams for a good while, but good luck trying to win that way against the powerhouses of the league. And by the way, when they've played the powerhouses of the league this year, the 49ers and now the Texans, who look really good, they've gotten their asses kicked. So now we're going to see what Kenny Pickett can do with the apparent chains of Matt Canada being taken off him. But if he continues to struggle, then there's going to need to be more changes made in the offseason. And I understand trying to be optimistic. But we heard much of the same things last year with Mac Jones in New England saying, oh man, how is he supposed to succeed with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia as his offensive coordinators? And then what happens? Well, they bring in Bill O'Brien this year, and guess what? Mac Jones still isn't good. I understand that everybody wants to point the finger at Matt Canada because that's easier to do. But we also have to acknowledge that the quarterback has been very bad. And he might just not be good. Not every quarterback in the league is going to be a good quarterback. Not every quarterback in the league is going to be a franchise quarterback. And as much as Steelers fans might not want to admit it, that's what it looks like they are dealing with right now. That looks like the situation they're in. And if that is the situation where if Kenny Pickett doesn't look any better, or if he does look better, it's not much better at all, and it's very clear that he's not the guy going forward, then they need to make those necessary adjustments in the offseason and go get a guy, preferably a veteran. Because if you're Cam Hayward, you're certainly not getting any younger. If you're Minka Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, you've never won a playoff game. I don't think running back a situation like they were just in, where they're drafting a guy and hoping that he's good, is going to be good enough. Like, Kirk Cousins is going to be a free agent. Go get him. Depending on what the Cardinals want to do with Kyler Murray, I think that they're probably leaning toward keeping him. But if the Cardinals, Jonathan Gannon and their new front office, who aren't tied to Kyler Murray, if they decide that they want to go out and get a different guy, Kyler Murray is going to be available. Trade for him. Because trying to, throw darts at a board and hoping that Bo Nix is going to be good, or hoping that Michael Penix is going to be good, or hoping that Jaden Daniels is going to be good, you're going to be right back in the same situation that you're in right now. At least it's possible that you will be. Could those guys end up being good? Sure, but even then, it's going to take time. You can't do another 2-year project because, okay, Cam Hayward is probably going to be gone by that point. Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt are going to be 2 more years older. They're not going to be as good as they are right now. They're going to have to make a lot of hard decisions this offseason, especially if Pickett doesn't play well. And if that is the case, then you're going to have guys like Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. Like, if Pickett doesn't play well and they roll him into year 3 and say, yep, he's our starter, Deontay Johnson's going to demand a trade. George Pickens is probably not going to want to be there. Fair or not? Because Deontay Johnson, you look at the Chiefs right now, you don't think that Deontay Johnson thinks to himself, yeah, I could absolutely be the number 1 there and help Patrick Mahomes and get a lot of targets and have a chance at a Super Bowl? You don't think that Deontay Johnson or George Pickens would love to be there? So they're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions. And the next few weeks of evaluating Pickett are going to be crucial for the future of the franchise. Because if he's not good and they still roll him out there in 2024, you're going to have a lot of pissed off players and a lot of angry fans. And if that is the case, they shouldn't. If they do draft a guy, that shouldn't be the only move they make at quarterback. They should draft a guy and bring in a veteran, but a veteran that they can win with. And I think that's why Kirk Cousins would be the perfect candidate in that situation, because Kirk's in his late 30s, but he's still playing really good football. And you can kind of Jordan Love a guy where, okay, we can use Kirk Cousins, and if we want to draft a Jaden Daniels in the second round, we can. If we want to draft a Michael Penix in the second round, we can. So if they do end up drafting a guy, it shouldn't be the only thing that they do. They need to bring in, and it can't be another Mitch Trubisky type thing either. No disrespect to Mitch Trubisky, but you're not getting anywhere with him at quarterback. Bring in a reliable guy. And again, if the Cardinals decide that, hey, we're going to be in position to take Drake May, maybe we'll be in position to take Caleb Williams, we want to do that. Thanks, Kyler. We wish you the best. The Steelers should absolutely trade for him. Absolutely should trade for him. So there's a lot of evaluating still to be done. Firing Matt Canada does, get rid of a huge problem, and that's great. But there's still a lot that needs to be evaluated in the next 7 weeks. And, depending on what happens if they get a playoff spot. But this was a good start. I think we can all agree as fans that this was much needed. And when we woke up this morning and saw all of the news, it was a relief in ways. And again, it's hard in this situation to, be ecstatic and celebrate, because at the end of the day, Matt Canada is still a human being who lost his job. And it's hard to find that gray area where to be the analyst side of it and say, yeah, it was the right thing to do, but at the same time, try to find the balance of not quote unquote celebrating it. But it was the right move to make. It was a move that had to be done. And now the Steelers have 7 weeks to evaluate what they have at quarterback and decide what they're going to do going forward. And these next 7 weeks are going to be absolutely crucial for both the immediate and long-term future of the franchise. And we'll see how that begins this Sunday against Cincinnati, which, by the way, they're facing Jake Browning. And if they don't win that game and Pickett gets outplayed by Jake Browning, we really need to have the conversation of, okay, should he be the starter in week 13? It's a real thing. But these next 7 weeks are absolutely crucial. But regardless, thank you guys for tuning in, whether you did on Twitter, YouTube, whatever you did. More stuff coming today on Behind the Steel Curtain with all of this news. More opinions, more stuff of that nature about the Matt Canada situation, him being fired, what's next for the Steelers, all of that on Behind the Steel Curtain. Please go read. Thank you guys, to to all of you who have read. This has been, like I said, a very busy morning, very busy day, very busy season. We're going to keep it all coming to you throughout the rest of the year. So thank you all for tuning in. Please keep reading. More stuff is coming. But Matt Canada fired as the offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we'll see what those ramifications end up being in the near future.